Welcome to Schmidtless Live, the show meant to inspire and educate leaders in technology and design. I'm Kurt Schmidt from Foundry, and I'm excited you're here today to join me and my buddy Rich. We're going to be talking about all things storytelling, everything to do from selling yourself to possible recruiters or getting that promotion. And Rich and I have gone a few times, on this show, and I love talking to him because he's got such great insights into all things, your personal brand, and just how to maintain in this time that's a little bit crazy for everyone. So I don't want to spend too much time preambling. I just want to jump right in and start talking to Rich. Rich, how you doing today?
Wonderful, Kurt. How are you? I appreciate the storytelling that led up to this. So, excellent segue.
Yeah, well, and that's it. I find more so these days because we are virtual. I feel like that art of storytelling has become even more important because we can only see each other from here to here, right? We can't see the body language. We can't be in front of people and kind of people getting a better understanding of who we are and the value we have. And so I believe that storytelling is even much more important. Do you find that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Storytelling, in my opinion, has been a lost art in a lot of ways. And prior to the pandemic, but now with the pandemic, in full force, as it were, it's become more prevalent and more needed because I think some people are still in that panic mode of, things stopped or slowed down considerably for a lot of people. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been put in situations where they've been furloughed or let go. And there's this panic that is set in. And panic should never be a substitute for value and for content and for storytelling, because it's in those panic moments that we feel like we have to just talk to as many people as possible. We have to get as many messages out there as possible.
Right, quantity,
so
right?
I just want to craft the quickest bullet pointed email to send to somebody. And I've unfortunately witnessed that being, somebody that's been pinged quite a bit. And the story is just not there. So I'm happy to engage people and I'm happy to be sold on things. But when you're coming at me with a copy and paste email, and unfortunately some people have forgotten to either change the name or change the company, like slow down and understand the value of telling the story, because that builds value for yourself, your product, your company, everything.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective, Rich. I hadn't put it that way in my head, but now that you say it, it makes a lot of sense. There is a lot of desperation, right? Because people are scared, right? So you can't just, like I mentioned, walk into a place and hand your resume, or go and look for that next client by going to that conference you're used to going to and having drinks afterwards, and and that's where you tell your story, right? So now you've got to kind of find these ways that you were used to being able to communicate your value, your background, your story. Those things are kind of gone now, and so I can see why people are panicking.
Absolutely. And I think especially when we think about the virtual environment, and you and I talked about this the other day, and I'm going through some remodeling this weekend because I have background envy of you, because your background tells a story. So don't think that you don't have these opportunities all the time to tell a story. And I think I broke out my Disco Stormtrooper helmet the other day, which is on the other side of the camera. But it could be a great placement back here. It's a story. It's part of my personality. It's who I am. I've got some art that tells a story, but it's a really good way to bond creatively. So if you think about being in an office and making a sales call or making a presentation, you're usually doing that on a webinar.
Yep.
With no background. And as comfortable as my office, if I remember correctly, because it's been so long, it doesn't tell the story that my home office does. And so think about ways that you can incorporate your personal brand and your personal story into your background in your office or in your Zoom background. While they were really quick fixes on the front end, like those cheesy virtual backgrounds, like take advantage of the space. Now, not everybody has that luxury, but figure out ways that you can be creative. Find a new spot in your place, find a new spot in your home, find a new spot in your office. You do some Schmidt list remodeling that I'm going to be doing, which is going to be the next show that we launch, like DIY home office remodeling.
Yeah.
But everything helps tell the story.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, because I think, again, using everything at your disposal, right? Not just your not just your voice, and but I mean, if You can tell a story with your background in your virtual, or by the clothes you're wearing, or the hat you're wearing, or even the type of the quality of your camera and the sound of your audio. I mean, all of it can help do
Right.
that. Let's talk about the types of stories though, because you kind of touched on that.
Hmm.
One story I find really powerful has always been origin stories, right? And
Hmm.
that's why they always retell them in Marvel comics and movies. And
Right.
so for people, really, what I've found is people who can really hone their origin story, kind of how they got into what they're doing and what their interests are, and being able to just kind of put that out there quickly for people. I think people just, again, I talk to so many people. They're like, well, I'm not a storyteller. I'm not Stephen King here, and it's like, well, you don't have to be Stephen King, but just do a little practice with some of you. And the easiest one I found is just origin stories.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're trying to be Stephen King in your resume, like I don't know who you're applying to, but hey, they may be the most fascinating company ever. But and I love the comparison to Marvel, and I'm a big Star Wars junkie, and so I thought about this earlier as I was thinking about talking with you today, and I thought about all of the characters that we love. If you describe Luke Skywalker you describe as somebody who's got this riddled history and this really controversial connection family wise and all of these different things. But if you objectify Luke Skywalker, blonde-headed guy, carries a glowing stick and can make rocks float.
He's also a bit whiny. I mean, all he does wants to go
So,
to
oh my
Tashi
God,
Station to
so
get power
whiny.
converters and
He's
party with
so,
his
my
friends.
7-year-old called that shot the other day when we were watching A New Hope. He was like, why is he whine so much? But it's, if again, we grasp onto things that have a story that make us care why. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily, if you look at R2D2, he's a robot. But there's a story that connects you to him. Same thing with your personal brand, same thing with your product, same thing with data. Make people care. Why do I care? And when I think about origin stories, we all love the thrill of a journey, and we all love the feeling of success and achieving a goal. And if you start with an origin, you're putting everybody that you're communicating with in the same place. So where is this coming from? Where's your story or originating from? Where does this problem start from? Where has it evolved to? Where is it now? And then where do you see it going in the future? So you're giving the background, you're giving me the why do I care? You're giving me the current snapshot so I'm engaged. And then you're giving me the forward looking view that you have so that I can now buy in and see what you're seeing. And so I'm along for the ride.
Yep.
So if you come back and just say, hey, I'm a marketing person or I'm a designer and here's what I've done. Uh, okay, you've kind of thrown yourself into a bucket with a whole lot of other people.
Right.
But if you talk about why you got into design or why you got into marketing, and then what you've done to this point and how passionate you are about it and why you care, I now have a better connection with you. And I'm either more likely to hire you, more likely to recommend you, more likely to do a lot of different things that I wouldn't normally if I just looked at you as kind of the black and white objectification.
Yeah. Well, and would you say, again, let's talk tactical.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about maybe something more tangible like a cover letter.
Mm.
That's a great opportunity to tell your story. But again, I see so many people struggle with, I don't want it to be too long, but I want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure it has all the keywords in there that it needs to have. I want to make sure that they understand that I'm excited to work there. And so there's all these stories that they're trying to tell in their cover letter. I mean, what's some advice you would give, Rich, for somebody just even telling their story applying for a job?
Sure, and I'll be the first to say that I hate cover letters, and I just do.
Well, they're
I think my
necessary
million
evil, aren't
dollar
they?
idea, and if anybody wants to go in it, I'm gonna put some trademarking on this real quick. Anybody wants to go in, and I think a virtual cover letter would be powerful because again, like you just described, cover letters are a blend of data, keywords, and then stories. And so we don't think about the story because we're so concerned about, greetings. I am very interested in this position at your company, and I think I would be excellent. And then you get into the bullet points of what you've done to this point. Looking forward to talking to you more about this. Like that, okay, that doesn't do much for me. But if you talk about your story, and I think if you flip the order of things, So what is the story? Why are you so interested in this job? Because if you put yourself in the HR person or the company president's position, they've taken time to craft that job description into that post, hoping to get the person, their prince or princess charming to apply for this job. That's the story. This is what they want to qualify for. So you can do the things like that's entry level. But then what are you doing to differentiate yourself? How are you saying this is why I'm passionate about this role? This
Right.
is why I'm passionate about this industry. This is where I've really found my niche or my groove with what you're looking for. This is why you should talk to me. Not don't get so caught up in the tactical data things. I mean, and it's tough because I say all these things, but we're still battling like HR software, scanners, and
Yep.
you've got to have some keywords. So I understand that. But weave those in to your story. Tell your story and then find out where you can implant those words or those things that you think are fundamental and need to be in there. But use the story as the lead, not the drag along.
Yeah, and again, back to your point about, and I love what you said about virtual cover letter. I mean, get creative. I mean, send a 2 minute video of yourself
Hmm.
talking to those people along with some information. Get creative, stand out from the crowd. And I think what people are too concerned with is that, again, going back to that balance of like, well, I want to seem very professional and I want to seem
Hmm.
like somebody you can, hire, somebody you can pay,
Right.
and go through that. But yet, I also want to stand out. So,
Hmm.
so there's this push and pull that happens, Rich. That where I see some people they lean way one way or the other, or they try to do something in the middle, which it just becomes messy, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's very nuanced and it's tricky because you want to find that happy medium
Yeah.
of personality and professionalism. And so, I've seen both cover letters and also sales pitches that are very quippy and very, I got one this morning, as a matter of fact, that I'm like, creative, completely missed the point, but good on
Yeah.
you. Um, but then it's, I don't want something so stiff that I look at it like, they could do the job, but am I going to like working with them? They
Yeah.
they sound like they would be really painful to work with, or they would be painful to hire because I don't think they get it. So it's very nuanced, and at the same time, we inherently are so afraid of feedback. But this is a great opportunity for you to, look to a mentor, look to a colleague in the industry, look to somebody that you can trust to say, hey, look, I would greatly appreciate your honest feedback on this. Do you think it's representative of who I am?
Hmm.
Because again, we're the worst at talking about ourselves, which I'm sure some people would debate me saying that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like it's really hard. That's why I hate cover letters and resumes because I hate quantifying or feeling like I'm being judged off of what I'm saying about myself. So work with somebody else, write what you think, and then work with a colleague or somebody that knows both your personality and your professional capabilities to say, hey, look, this is great, but you're leaving out a bunch of your decision making capabilities and the fact that you love problem solving and those kinds of things. So look to that feedback. Yes, it's scary, but it is probably the most powerful exercise of any resumes or sales pitches or whatever.
Yeah.
Look for that feedback.
Yeah, and I think it goes to, again, making, if we can shift gears a little bit and talk about sales,
Mm.
the same type of thing as you're mentioning is that I get so many LinkedIn things every day, all day long,
Oh God.
about like, hey, could
That's
you
a
use
whole
80
another
more
that's
leads?
a whole nother episode right there.
Oh man, could you use 80 leads in the next month? And I'm like, no, like we're busy, so I'm good. But I feel bad for these people. I feel like I want to respond and be like, yeah, thanks for the message. It must be the Minnesota nice in me that feels like I should respond in some way, even though I don't need their services or anything. And what I'm finding is that things that are working are where people are just delivering value straight to people,
Mhm.
right? So you're sending them a small playbook that says, hey, you're in this industry and here is what we're sending out to our clients that we also work with that are like yours, telling
Right.
them what the next thing they should be looking out for. Check it out, or here's a short video on that or something, instead of where you're saying, hey, could you go and do some homework for me? How many how many salespeople do you have? How many leads do you need? How many, and it's like, can
Mhm.
you just deliver the things that have worked, at least for me and then to me, have been where people are just, they just know who I am, they know what my business is, and they just deliver something of value. And then hopefully, I find that of value and I contact them to find out more about what they're doing. I mean, what have you seen working, Rich?
I love the idea of sending value on the front end. So a PDF or a video, some kind of data and or a comparable story.
Mm,
And I think even before that, and this ties into storytelling as well, look at quality leads and not quantity.
right.
Because if you can do a little due diligence and figure out who I am or what my company is or what our sales structure is, because I mean, you can go on LinkedIn and look up a company and look at everybody with the title sales
Yeah,
and
and
figure
every
out
company has a blog nowadays, so
exactly
you can read what they've been up to and what they're doing.
right. Right. I mean, there's no excuse now to not do that due diligence on the front end. So please, if you're in sales, take the time to qualify your leads, figure out what verticals they're in, figure out what they're doing, look them up on the news. Like that's how I prospect companies, and that's what I look at when I'm doing research. And then when you're engaging, be very thoughtful about what you're sending. If I'm sending something to someone, it needs to be aligned with their industry. It needs to be aligned with what I've perceived their needs to be. But it also gives a little bit of a story, weave that in, the story of how you've helped or what you've done for somebody in their industry, probably a competitor, because that's going to get my attention. I want to know what other people are doing that's either helping them succeed or
Right.
fail,
Can you
because then
can
that
that
helps
value
me.
is that inside knowledge, right?
Absolutely. And to your point, like I'm a huge client experience person. And so if you're contacting me to get me to buy something from you, but then you're making me do all the work.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and yes, I understand like Calendly becomes very convenient. Here you go on my site and go
Oh,
find
I
the time.
hate that. I hate that. I
Like
mean, it's
I,
fine if we've had an exchange and that's just the natural next step. But
right.
people who just send me links saying, "Hey, find a time on my calendar and let's talk," and I'm like, "No, like that's not."
Right. Now I've got to go look at your page and look at your availability and then compare it to my calendar and try to figure out my availability to your availability. But I think also the thing that works for me too, and both, outward and inward, is ask questions. Ask questions. And don't be afraid to ask questions that you already know the answer to. And that to me starts the conversation because you're asking, a lot of these sales pitches that you mentioned, and we've talked about this before, they're yes, no questions. Do you want more leads? I mean, okay, grand scheme, sure. Do you need more sales efficiency? Who doesn't? Like, okay, you're giving me a yes, no question. And so if I don't want to be bothered, then I'm going to say no. And I may need it, but I don't need it like today at, 10:20 a.m. But if you're building the story and you're building the need and you're building the value, I may not need you at 10:20 on Thursday, but I may need you on October 1st at 11 a.m.
Hmm.
because now I have had the time to really find the value. But if I feel like I'm just being sold and I'm not being invested in, then I'm not going to look to you.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's actually going to turn a little bit more of an unfair favor towards you when I start looking for something that you may provide. So
Yep.
do your homework. Spend time on the engagement. Spend time on the communication. Don't, and God, for the love of God, don't copy and paste your sales messages. Please stop it. Just stop. Just
Yeah.
stop it.
Yeah, because you can tell it's so obvious. Well, then let's again. And again, I know I'm jumping between kind of recruiting and hiring and sales, but I feel like it's all kind of selling yourself in some sort of fashion. I think
Absolutely.
there's a tight thread there. So let's talk about other applications for selling yourself, right? Well, let's talk about the storytelling piece. One thing that I was doing a coaching session, career coaching session with someone yesterday, and they asked me, what should I do about this or that or this or that? And I was like, well, one thing you should do is clean up your social media a bit,
Mhm.
because people will Google you. And she basically just said, do all recruiters act like you? And I'm like, no, not everybody acts like me, but people will Google you. You apply for a job, they will Google you. And so, what is the story that your other platforms are telling about you. Maybe again, back to using a term of passive storytelling, right? Like what are the, do you have your own website that talks about you? What is that story saying? If I Google you and you have articles written in big magazines and stuff like that, that's cool, but if I see, you at a frat party and your Instagram page, and
Right.
that's, those are the images that are coming up, you might want to go in and do some cleanup if you're looking for, a six-figure job, right?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think where it comes to is that companies are so aware of reputation management from a social media standpoint. I mean, go back 10 years, that wasn't the case. But now, because there so many companies have seen reputations get destroyed, relationships get destroyed, sales get destroyed because there was that wild card that they didn't see hiding in plain sight because they didn't do their research on social media. So not only from a problematic standpoint, but to your point, and I love what you said, be consistent. Because at the same time, like if you've got a great, beautiful blog site and you're putting out all this great content and you're talking about, your positive aspects and what you really enjoy doing, and then somebody also goes and looks at your Twitter and you're just bashing people left and right because you feel the freedom to do so, which is great. That's totally up to you. But you at the same time have to reset your expectations. Like if you want to go do that, by all means, I'm not saying don't express yourself, but understand that there will be companies that will probably turn you down
Yep.
because they don't want to invite that in. You then become a little bit of a liability prior to the hire.
Right.
So we don't want to make that mistake, and we can't afford to have that cost us.
Well,
So
back to your point about doing the research on the company. If it is important to you to have a strong, like you said, Twitter presence, that's maybe political or whatever the case may be, you might not want to go and get a job at a Fortune 500 company or make that your goal, because those are the places that, like you said, are going to look at that more as a liability, right or wrong. It just
right.
is what it is, right?
Yeah, it is, and I think too the flip side of that is that do what you need to do to create your personal brand and feel comfortable with your personal brand. Again, I'm not saying compromise who you are because somebody may stumble upon your Facebook page, but what I am saying is that by doing that, you now position yourself for the right company. And I think there are those people in the marketplace that will say, well, I want to work for this company, but this is kind of who I am. Well, that's just not a good fit for you then. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to enjoy your job. And
Right.
again, it goes back to the don't
And you're not going
panic.
to change that company.
Right, exactly. You're not going to roll in because you've got a really strong Instagram presence and then just completely change their culture because you are who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think what I'm trying to get to is that I want people to understand that you need to be looking for companies that you match up with. And in that panic phase, you may think, I just need a job. And that's, if you got to do what you got to do, I completely understand that.
Yep.
But in the long run, when you look at the right match, and this is both looking for a new position, looking for a company to move to, looking for a company to work with. Because again, when I coach a lot of people, I say, look, go sell a company that you want to work with. There's nothing worse than working your tail off for a contract or a sales agreement. And then all of a sudden you figure out, man, this company is either morally compromised,
Yeah.
they're really difficult to work with,
Right.
or the person's just a jerk that I'm going to have to be dealing with day in and day out. That's going to be miserable for you. So use it to your advantage too. So don't just, don't go, pull up all your social media accounts and panic because of what you may posted 3 years ago, but definitely do some cleanup. But also look at what is your own consistent story? What are you putting out there? Look at your own social media from an objective outside perspective and say, what am I saying about me? How am I conveying myself? And again, go get some feedback from somebody else. Hey, Kurt, can you take a look at my Instagram and tell me what you're seeing? Well,
Yeah.
I'm seeing this, this, and this. Is that consistent with what you want to portray? Maybe, maybe not. Because again, we get in our own mind of saying, well, I'm being me and this is who I am and people just need to accept it. Okay, that's fine. But to your point, if you're going to be this radical political person or you're going to be this very unabashed F-bomb dropping individual on Twitter, probably not going to be a phenomenal fit for a Fortune 100 company.
Yeah. Well, and let's get back into the tactical side of things. So what I love what you said is number one, seeking outside help, is getting someone you trust, a peer, hopefully somebody in your industry, somebody who understands it, somebody maybe you've worked with in the past or something, someone to just chat with about, what do you think some of my strengths are? What are some of my weaknesses? What are areas I could get better at? Where, how was I the go-to person for anything? um, um, and, um, and then being able to come back and say, okay, this is how I'm perceived from the outside a bit more. I can weave that into the story I want to tell.
Hmm.
Back to, and I say this all the time, right? Like there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who have a coach and then people who don't know they need a coach. So,
It's very true. It's
so,
great.
so go find that kind of account buddy who can help you do that. I mean, how would you go about doing that, Rich? How would you structure that? How would you ask somebody to do that to help you write your story?
I think, I love what you said about the coaching aspect. And when I think about coaches, I also think, you pick whatever sport or industry, everybody has a coach. LeBron James has a coach. As good as he is, he still has a coach. He has several coaches. And he has a fitness coach and he has a nutrition coach. And they don't think that you're not in a position where you can continue to get better. If anybody says, I am the best I'm going to be right now, and I don't need a coach, and I've got it all figured out, good luck with that.
Yeah, well, I'll just go and read some books,
Right.
self-help books that will get me there, or read some audiobooks, or listen to
Right.
some audiobooks, or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
I just fixed myself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm, my bookshelves on the other side of my Schmidt list remodel are, I've got all kinds of great books that I read, and it sparks questions about me, and it spark, I get curious about what I could do better or how I could grow myself. But is that book going to change that? No, it's going to spark the conversation for me to start figuring things out. But nothing replaces that one-on-one or small group coaching, that you have those conversations, that you get that real-time feedback, because these people are writing books for a general audience of a certain identifier. But are they going to, like, it doesn't get to the end of the book and say, here's your free coaching code that, go to Mel Robbins' website and you're going to be coached by Mel Robbins directly. You leverage the things that you're learning, identifying your weaknesses and your strengths, and figure out where you need to spend more time. But that coach can help you do that in real time and can do it subjective to you and be a little bit more direct, as opposed to a semi-broad approach to what you need to be doing better.
Yeah, and it does feel a bit unnatural to make yourself that vulnerable to go out and ask somebody,
Oh, it's terrifying.
for that sort of thing. But I mean, how do you get over that?
I again, it's all humility, and it's humility in the sense of not saying I'm wrong or I'm broken or I need fixing. It's saying, hey, here's what I'm really good at, and here's what I love doing, and here's my passion. Where do I need to enforce some things? Again, if you think, like, I'm a big video game fan too, so when I think about player profiles or
Yeah,
some kind of profile within a game,
right.
there's always a factor that is less than, so you have a strength, but you also have a weakness to offset it.
Hmm.
And we all have those as people in life. We have those strengths, but we also have weaknesses. Like, my handwriting sucks. I mean, that's one of my biggest weaknesses. I have a lot of different weaknesses, but I've embraced them, and not as weaknesses or faults, but as areas that I can grow. So again, it's taking that humble mentality of, we can all get better. We can all improve. Nobody's perfect, and give yourself the grace of understanding that by understanding your weaknesses, you're just trying to get better. You're just trying to be the best that you can possibly be. Because if you think about, like, one industry vertical and one descriptor vertical, so if I think about all marketing directors nationwide or globally, I promise you, a vast majority of those people are doing that same thing. They're trying to get better. They're trying to educate more. They're trying to improve their weaknesses. They're trying to improve on even their strengths. And so if I sit back and say, well, I read an article about how to be a better leader, so I'm good, that's not going to get me to where I want to be in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
So again, be humble, understand that you're just doing the best thing for you and the best thing for your future, and move forward with it.
Now it's really, like I said, it's so important to just understand that your goals are more important than maybe how you're feeling right at that moment,
Right.
and
Exactly.
and to push through it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And again, it is going to be one of the most uncomfortable things you ever do. And whenever I coach somebody to go get feedback, If it's somebody that I'm trying to say, hey, go talk to a couple of industry colleagues and figure out where you stand with things.
Yeah.
One thing I always tell them is that whenever you do that, whenever you engage somebody in very honest feedback, that's tough for them too, because
Yep.
they're put in a position where they've got to, I mean, sometimes have to be brutally honest.
Yep.
And so when I tell them, so if I say, Kurt, you need to go get 3 pieces of feedback from 3 people that you trust, but what you have to say, and the only thing that you can say once they tell you this honest feedback is, thank you very much for taking the time to do that. You can't argue, you can't debate, you can't question it, you can't justify it. You have to just take it. And that in of itself is the biggest growth opportunity. Again, like I'm afraid of heights, and that's right up there with heights, is getting that feedback, because it is nerve-wracking, because you don't know what's going to come out of these people's mouth. And it could be a complete blind spot that you thought you had a stranglehold on. You're like, I'm great at presentations. And somebody comes back and says, well, your presentations are, you're enthusiastic, but they're all over the place with content. You need to focus your message and get a little bit more honed in on what you want to get across.
Yeah, and people who have followed me for a few years will know that what I'm about to say about the word feedback, which I hate that word, and what you're wanting, what you don't want is you want advice, right? You want, and that it seems so simple that nomenclature change in your conversation or in your email or whichever. What advice would you have for me? Asking people for feedback. Number one, you don't want feedback because feedback is in the past tense. It's stuff you can't change usually. And what you really are asking for is advice. What should I be doing? What's in the future? And you'll get a much different response. I mean, my father taught me this a long time ago when I had a bad boss. I would ask for feedback and he'd be like, work harder, take less vacation, you know? um, but when my father told me to say, stop asking for feedback because what you want is his advice on how to do a better job.
Right.
And I changed that conversation. My whole relationship changed with this person because they looked at what I was asking for was not something I needed to take from them, but something I was giving them respect. I was looking for their help in moving up, not just what they saw in the rearview mirror of what has happened. So yeah, to your point, Rich, like being able to kind of get over yourself
Right.
is the short answer, right? Get over
And, I,
yourself.
and I'm getting over myself right now because I love that explanation. So I'm switching my whole approach to the feedback conversation. Well, and if you think about it this way, and I love what you said too, because instead of saying, give me feedback, because that immediately puts the person that's providing that in almost a defensive position.
It does. It does. You can see
advice.
people like cross their arms and.
Right. Like, one, they're uncomfortable. Two, they're put in a bad position, and there's automatic tension, whether we admit it or not.
No, because feedback has a negative connotation. It just does.
Right. Right. Exactly. And so if you say, and I love this, I mean, I'm thinking through it in real time.
Yeah.
So if you say, can you give me advice on how this, I could strengthen this, or how I could be better at this, or how I could just be better overall, they're now going to reword everything in a positive stance.
Right.
I think you really have an opportunity to do this by doing this.
Yep.
That's advice to me, as opposed to feedback saying, well, that one time you put out the report that sucked.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that anymore.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'd stay as far away from writing or presenting as I possibly could if I were you. It puts them in a more positive stance to give you that proper advice. So right. As of right now, we are canceling the word feedback.
Yes.
And we're switching to advice.
Yes, I love it. Well, it goes back to what we were talking about in the sales funnel as well, right? Because delivering value, delivering advice, right? Like you said, like I know who your competitors are. I work with them. I know what they're doing. They're all investing in this new technology or this new type of real estate or whatever the case may be. And you're that person coming in and saying, are you seeing this too? What's your advice, or whichever, because again, you're putting them in a position of respect. You're putting them in a position where they're the expert, and you have an opportunity to truly learn from them. If you're just trying to earn a buck, that's just you're in the wrong business. Then you're not in that. You should just be doing cold calls and seeing if people can buy your subscription plan or
Right.
encyclopedias. I don't
Well, and that approach too, I mean, you minimize the loyalty factor. You
Right.
minimize the risk of being completely ruled out if they have to consolidate vendors, if they have
Right.
to consolidate spend. And so if you are, to your point, if you're just trying to make a buck and you're not providing advice and guidance,
Yep.
and if you're just selling,
Yep.
then when it comes time for budget cuts or when it comes time for cost cutting, I'm looking at the people that I work with that I value, that I feel value me, and I have a good relationship with. But
Yep.
if you're, vendor 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm client 6, 7, 8 to you, then there's not that relationship
Yep.
built.
Yep.
And so again, that it goes back to that engagement and that relationship, and I'll use the word emotion, like build
Yeah.
the emotion in the connection. And I'm a huge Nancy Duarte fanboy. Like some people will talk about like all the celebrities that I mean, you give me Kara Golden of Hintwater, you give me Nancy
You and me, we
Duarte,
mean both.
you give me Mel Robbins. Like I'm a fanboy of all of them.
Yeah.
And one of the things in Nancy's books when she talks about the power of presenting is building the emotion through storytelling. And so, if you're talking about data or if you're talking about anything, build up, here's a good scenario. However, so, we've uncovered some, we've looked at the data and here's what we've found. However, this is where we find opportunity, but we have a solution. And so you're kind of giving them this valley feel, but in that pull down and in that bring up, I've just literally made those words up. That's where you're building the emotion, and that's where you're building the value and the connection to the people that you're presenting to, that you're selling to, that you're trying to get a job with. Like these are the things that you need to be really buying into. So it's so critical to look at this as the long game. Again, get out of the copy paste mentality and get into the relationship building service and advisement and connection, and feel it, like let your clients feel like you care about them. That is irreplaceable. Absolutely irreplaceable.
Well, and it goes back to what we talked about in the hiring process and you can't out professionalism someone via a resume.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost a race to the bottom. So that's why I always tell people like, yeah, you should sound professional. When I say professional, I mean just like what you're talking about. But if you don't stand out, you can't compete on professionalism. It's the same way, I used to joke all the time about why don't advertising agencies advertise? It's
Mm-hmm.
because what would they say about each other or about themselves, right? Is that I do more advertising than this other
They're on
person,
resume.
right? So it's the same thing with trying out professionalism someone
Yep.
else, right? I was talking with someone recently who was saying, well, this person who, graduated school later than me got a job sooner than me. So what am I doing? What am I doing wrong?
Right.
And
Right.
and it's again, it goes back to that, comparing yourself to someone else is the first step to like falling backwards down the stairs, right?
Right. Well, and two, when you think about, so if you think about applying for a job and there's, the company has set a range of salary that they're going to be paying for that role. If you're just another person that's got a good professional resume and you're battling, stat for stat and accomplishment for accomplishment, you're kind of getting in that middle ground, middle to low ground. But if you've built the story and you've built the relationship and you in the interview process or in the cover letter have now gotten somebody's attention, you're now starting in the middle and working your way up. And if you get to a point where you start thinking about yourself about how am I irreplaceable in this role? What can I bring to this role that makes that hiring manager or makes that company thrilled that they got me, that they couldn't move on with this position without me? And again, it's not, some people say, well, that's an arrogant way to look at it. No, it's a confident way of looking at it. I'll take confidence all day long, and confidence comes in different forms. But if you say, well, I guess I'll just put forth my 4 bullet points per position and format it the right way and make sure that this is left justified and hopefully they like my font, then all of a sudden you've put yourself in a bucket with everybody else.
Yep.
But if I don't care if I put my resume in wingdings, if I tell you a good story and if I build the value in myself, chances are you'll find a way to decode my resume in wingdings because you want to know more about me. and
Yeah.
you buy into it. Again, we get hooked by stories. We get hooked by those things. Think about it, the last book you read, or the last really good movie that you watched, or the really last good show that you watched. There was a story that got you hooked in the
Hmm.
first chapter or in the first pilot episode
Yep.
or whatever it was. Think of it that way. What makes somebody want to learn more about you? What makes somebody absolutely have to talk to you in the interview process? And what makes somebody want to have to hire you, whether it's a new hire for a new company, whether it's a new hire as a vendor? What is it? What is that? What are you making people just crave about you?
Hmm.
Your resume is going to do an okay job of showing your credentials,
Yep.
but not building that value.
Yep. Well, and again, back to the idea of standing out and being professional. We're hiring at Foundry, and I got a great cover letter the other day that said, "Hi, I'm blah blah blah, and I'm your next project manager," and then proceeded to go on to tell me why.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
it was about our company. It was about their impact. They'd obviously, like you had said, they'd done their research. They knew some of our clients. They mentioned some similar types of work that they'd worked on and some of the challenges that they overcame in those things. It was fantastic. It was like I was already talking to somebody who worked for us.
Right. And kudos to blah 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 for writing that amazing cover letter. And I've heard that more times than not. And I've heard
Okay.
it in various industries when you're pitching a new client, or in this case when you're pitching yourself for a position. If you could give the feeling to that individual that you're already a part of the team because you know so much, and they did a beautiful job of researching your company, researching your client base, researching your culture. Don't think for 1 second that the way a website is written doesn't say something about a company's culture. Pay attention to that. And they did a great job of matching up their mentality with, okay, this person is going to read this cover letter. What do I want them to think and feel that is going to be differentiated? And they did a beautiful job of figuring that out and executing it. Same thing, like take your time to really dive into the nuances of the company, the nuances of the culture, find out as much as you can, and then you'll figure out one of two different ways. And Foundry is an easy way to figure out, like, hey, I want to work for this company, and this is how I'm going to position it. Or you may get to a point where you're like, this doesn't feel like a good match after all. But that is where you really differentiate yourself in the process, is to do that homework, take your time, and then again, put yourself in the shoes of that individual. What can you say or do that makes them think this person already feels like a member of our team? Like, why this is a natural process from this point forward because we have to have
Makes sense. I love it. So, Rich, we've been going. I could talk to you all day because you're fantastic.
them.
And so, Rich, you're doing a lot of speaking events lately. What do you got coming up? What can I work? Where can I find Rich? Where's a great place to connect with you?
Yeah, I've got a lot going on. It's not atypical of my own personal brand, but right now I'm going through a lot of different changes, which are great, and it's to that point where the speaking and the podcast and everything that I'm doing has grown to a point where it needs this. So I'm going through a rebrand right now, which I'm really excited about. A new website update as well, which you can find everything about me at richbracken.com. But there's a new video series coming, which, honestly, I have to give credit where credit's due. Kurt has given me some insight on how to create dynamic videos, and I have been inspired to create a new series called Inspirational Interruptions that's going to be coming very soon
Awesome.
that I'm so excited about. And I've learned a lot from this gentleman, so I owe him a debt of gratitude for this. I will probably also charge you back for some coffee that I'm going to have to drink to get through this process of getting all these videos done.
Yeah,
But
I know
hey,
how it goes.
it's all in good fun and love. But yeah, richbracken.com's got everything from the podcast. I've got a great new episode that launched this week. I've got some great celebrity guests coming up. But richbracken.com is the hub of everything.
Awesome, Rich. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to have Rich back on a regular basis to talk through these types of interesting things because there's such a great, Rich has got such a great perspective on, just that storytelling aspect and the importance of it and a very pragmatic way to approach it. So thanks again for joining me, Rich. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, brother. I appreciate it.
Cool. So thanks everyone for joining me. Make sure you show up tomorrow. We've got a great show with my good friend Jonathan Banks, where we're going to talk about how to support Black entrepreneurship and Black founders. Yeah, I'm really excited. He's taught me so much, especially in this past year where we've all had to do a lot of learning. So join me tomorrow. It's going to be a great show, and bring your questions. And then in the next couple of weeks, we've got even more stuff going on, more conversations. Honestly, I'm having a blast doing it. I'm so happy that you joined me. I really appreciate you taking the time and spending it with us. So we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.